Good evening, everyone. It's John L. Stanizzi, and I'm so happy to be back at the Raymond Library in East Hartford. It has now become many times that we've read here, and it's always a pleasure. There's nothing quite like going home and being in familiar surroundings and seeing familiar faces. It's truly a joy, and of course we have to thank Rolanda and her tirelessness for that. I'm going to read a few poems today, and we'll see where it takes us. I haven't really given much thought. I thought I would try something different and not really give much thought to what I was going to read or the order in which I was going to read. I have enough poems from which to choose that I thought I would just sort of go that way. And I want to start with a poem that, let me just get this, hold on just a quick second here. I thought I would start with a poem that I rarely ever read, only because it's so long. But, just because it's long shouldn't mean that it gets short-shrifted because of its length. It's about the passing of my best friend, Augustino Thomas Aiello, my Uncle Gus. We were very, very tight, and had a blast together. Might have done a thing or two that was a little unsavory, but hey, you know how that goes. We always had a good time. He was just such a great guy. And as I said, the poem is long, but I hope you like it. It's called "The Things I Used to Do." The things I used to do, and it starts with an epigraph from Guitar Slim. Guitar Slim says, "The things that I used to do, Lord, I won't do no more." For my uncle Augustino Thomas Aiello. November 26, 1938, October 18th, 2017. Summer afternoons I played alone on the first floor back porch, 3 lopsided wooden steps up, just outside a battered door of oak and chipped blue paint that hid a hallway of linear perspective and splattered shadows, dark and yellowed at their edges. And right there, where I slid the tiles of my number puzzle, was the plain mirror of Mrs. Lewis's window, backed by thick black drapes, stained and frightening. And if by mistake I cast my eyes in the direction of that window, all I saw was a stop bath reflection, fogged in black and white, of a cow-eyed child, his insides as jittery then as now. One afternoon I stood on that little porch and heard the squeak and bang of your screen door. With one eye shut, I squinted against the back of my hand, looked directly into the sunlight with the other eye, and strained to fashion your shape from all those bolts of hot-spurred opticals of summertime. You emerged 4 floors up beyond the swayback, sagging anchor fence with what seemed, to my 8-year-old eyes, to be a rock and roll attitude. The Sacred Heart of Jesus bright and flaming across the delts of your upper left arm, black-rimmed Buddy Holly shades, a glide in your stride as you pushed your chest out and clicked your shoulder blades together a couple of times, yawning and looking out over the north end. Shimmering heat rising from the tar roofs, and you, Kooky Burns, scratched your belly nonchalantly and took the vision in of your turf. Your big Gibson sunburst was hung over one shoulder. Elvis, half concealed, in the filthy stage lights of an Albany Avenue noon. Like all the other kids, my imagination was swollen with the Big Bopper, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Gene Vincent. But now, unlike all the other kids, you were going to marry my aunt and become my uncle, Augustino Aiello, Gusti, Uncle Gus. I had seen you swagger down the avenue in your skin-tight white tee and a high, slick pompadour, which, if it were not black, would have been chrome. I knew right away that you'd teach me good. The 3 steps were so heavily coated with years of brown paint, they appeared as corduroy, each stair with its centered, concave, worn spot, beveled by years of miles. Right down through the colors of history, and finally into the natural wood, the inconspicuous antiquity of comings and goings, humdrum or frenzied. That's where I began to practice being you. I started by going to Jimmy's Five and Dime on the corner of Brook and Mather and buying a comb for a nickel. Then, dipping my new comb into a glass of water, I began to rehearse slicking my hair back, checking my reflection in her black window. I didn't care about old Mrs. Lewis anymore. I had rolled the sleeves of my baggy white undershirt up over my bony shoulders, and I was studying hypnosis. This was 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis days, and I had seen your army photo, my mystical portal into the terrors of manhood. And so you mustn't ever see me weeping with horror about war, crying into Big Millie's plaid couch, or hear me gagging on my tears in the shower, hoping to soap away the terror and the nightmare of ashes. I remember the night you taught me the word rod. It was fall, chilly. You had on your black motorcycle jacket over your tee, silver buckle, silver buttons, silver studs, silver grommets. You said, "You know what a rod is?" "No," I said. You scanned the street, making sure that it was clear. "This is a rod," you said, opening your leather down around the belt line, pulling the jacket away from your shirt just enough for me to catch a glimpse of a heavy brown pistol grip, the rest of the rod shoved down between your jeans and your belly, and everything changed. I learned that night that many of the things I'd end up finding exciting would more often than not also be dangerous. We continued walking down Albany Avenue, my hypnosis taking on a darker, more serious tone. The landscape got flustered. It always does. Decades passed, evaporated, Father Shanley had said to me once. October's nearly noiseless leaf against leaf, the unhinging of constellations scattering in the air, stealing as they fall, the singular history of each leaf. Your first diagnosis came in 2000. Had I known enough to pay attention, I might have recognized the sound of despair in those tumbling leaves. I should have practiced the word goodbye with the same fervor that I practiced slicking back my hair in Old Lady Lewis's window. But I'm going to put that one on you, Unc. You took this cancer thing with the same attitude you took everything. Hey, it is what it is. What the fuck you going to do? I got fucking cancer, and someday it's going to fucking kill me. You got to make the best of it, right? What the fuck? You said to me one night under a cloud of heavy smoke at the Let It Ride table at the Mohegan Sun, a din of bells and whistles and rock music, shards of conversation in 100 languages, and the names of lost people over the PA. Let it ride. It's a no-brainer, you always told me. A couple of days before your soul said, enough, enough, you lay in your hospital bed in the gray room in the gray light, waiting for the full tide of gray to roll in and cover everything. Your voice had already washed out to the Black Sea along with your language. Even your tattoos faded, but always boisterous, even when they were quiet. You were repeating some silence which seemed to be saying, I want, I want, I want. And I wondered, what did you want? To go? To stay? To live? To die? Did you want your legs back that had been paralyzed by radiation, so that if you chose to succumb, you could simply get up and walk out full of rage, savagely drunk, stride with the style of an Avenue Hood rod in his waist, or with the pace of a man who had spent years folding the wild into quiet acceptance. That meant simple gardens, a glass of wine, and the squeak and bang of the screen door, which you knew would eventually hasten you along among October leaves, fallen and spent. Love you, Unc. He was a good guy, I'm telling you. He certainly was. I think I have time. I for one more. That's a long poem. I'll read one now that I wrote for my grandmother. It's called Communion. And what happened was, she, when she wasn't supposed to, she got divorced from my grandfather. And with that divorce came excommunication. She couldn't go to church anymore or receive communion. But she went to church, did not receive communion, and it would torture her, that she couldn't receive communion. And so one day I had had enough, and I decided to give her communion myself. So when I went up to receive communion on my way back, I broke my host in half, and I sort of nudged her a little bit and showed it to her. And I whispered in her ear, Body of Christ. And I'll be darned, she opened her mouth and she took in the communion, and for a time was extremely happy. This is called Communion. When the avenue was cleaned with whirlybirds of seeds in a polished city with sparkling windows, I'd sit in a bucket full of water on hot August days, or lie on the cool linoleum floor between my grandmother's big brown shoes and stare up into the mystery of snaps and nylon under her dress. She was an excommunicant, and Tony, the nice man with the wife and children, would be there most days, sitting at the sunny table and speaking so softly that I couldn't hear. My grandfather was gone by then, and his red-headed daughter put on a bus to somewhere by her red-headed mother, Jenny, the prostitute. And whenever my grandfather did come round, he'd always wipe the corners of his eyes with the backs of his wrists when he talked to me. The only thing my grandmother ever needed she couldn't have, until the day at Mass when I drank the blood of Christ, kept it wet on my lips, and took his body, cupped in my hands, back to her in the pew where I nudged her, opened my hands to the great disobedience, and nodded. No, she said, as I kissed her mouth. Blood of Christ. broke his body, ate half, put the other to her mouth. Body of Christ, salvation's relief shining through the guilt in her face. Well, thank you very much. I hope you're okay with me only reading 2. I usually read 4 or 5, but I really wanted to read the one from my uncle. I never get to read that one because of its length, and so I hope that was okay with you. I'm extremely happy to be back here at the Raymond Library. All my love to my friends who are reading with me. We are very lucky indeed to have this venue and to have Rolanda. Okay, so thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, and I know that I'll see you down the road sometime. Thank you. Peace. Blessings.